Hey, hello everybody. This is Nels Davis, and welcome to the stream. Today I'm going to talk about product management jobs and how to get them. You know, getting a product manager job is pretty hard. There's a huge amount of competition for these jobs, a lot more supply, a lot more people looking for these jobs than there are people who are offering these jobs. And so that you have to bring all your powers to bear if you want to get a job in product management. And in particular, that's true if you are trying to get into product management without having had a product manager job. So let me tell you, in this video today, or in this stream today, I'm going to talk about 3 ways to be more successful in this product management job search. One is, how do you map your story to product management? Now, this applies in particular if you haven't had a product management job before, but I think some of the points will really apply to you as well if you're trying to get a new job in product management, even if you've done product management already. I'm going to talk about how every resume bullet is really related to a story, talk about how to tell those stories and how to turn resume bullets into that. And finally, we'll talk about how that transition from story to resume to interview question, how that works, and how you can make the best of those situations. So let's get right into it. So as I've said, getting a product manager job is really hard. There's a lot more candidates out there than there is product management jobs. It's a very hot job. Everybody wants it. Everybody feels like it's the next step. A lot of people feel like it's the next step from being a developer is going into product management. Of course, there's only 1/10 as many product managers as there are product developers, and typically that's 1 to 2% of any particular company's workforce. Might even be less at some companies, might be a little more, but roughly speaking, that's about where it is. That's one little tiny slice of the pie in terms of all the employees. Whereas there's 10 times as many developers, there's maybe 20 times as many salespeople, maybe even up to 40 times. So a lot of other organizations in the company, there's a lot more folks than there are product managers. And that's just the reality. It means that there is a lot of supply for that job and there's not as much demand. Super important job, super fun, super worth getting into, but it is it is very challenging to get into it, as you probably know. So it's particularly true if it's your first PM job that you want to get into, right? You've never been a PM. You're just a baby, you're a toddler in this situation. But even then, there's ways to do it. There's ways to try to get into it, and there's ways to not. Now, a lot of times we talk about people getting into product management as their first job is really a lateral move. And a lot of times that's really what you're going to do. But even in a lateral move, you're going to need to somehow pitch yourself for the product management job opening, or pitch yourself as a potential product manager, even if maybe they don't have a job opening at your company or whatever it might be. And so you need to think about how you're going to tell that story that makes it sound like you will be good at product management. Now, I'm going to assume that you will be good at product management. And I think that if that means that if you are going to be good at product management, then you have probably done something that is sort of product management like. And if you think about the basic structure of product management, this is what I talk about in my book, The Secret Product Manager Handbook. The basic structure of product management at a very high level is that we find market problems. We find problems that are causing people pain in the market. And then we create solutions to those problems. Typically we do that through a team. Our development team. We don't create the solutions ourselves as product managers, but we're very involved in that. And we then take those solutions to market. We work with sales and marketing to take the solutions out to market, to help them find the right people who have the problem, and to help them understand how to pitch the story so that we can close the deal, so we can make revenue with our fantastic solution that solves the problem better than other competitors do, right? So that's what we do. So if you are thinking about getting into product management, and you're not a product manager yet, I would suggest find that story, a story like that, in your own background and things you've done. And if you are likely to be good at product management, you probably have done some stuff like this. So let's give an example. So this is from a real resume. I worked with a guy who was just getting out of school, and he had done this project, and he was thinking about getting into product management. So I said, well, let's see if what you did aligns with product management. So the way that he described it on the resume was as follows. So first place winner of the Paperboard Packaging Alliance Student Design Challenge. He redesigned some shipping packages. He did some testing of those things, and he built some machines. I think that's kind of cool. He built machines for packaging design and shipment testing. So he did the whole set of things, and this was a sponsored contest or design challenge by somebody who some company that needed their packages redesigned. So this sounds like a really designy thing to do. It sounds like he built stuff. So there's a lot of problems with the way that he expressed it, but in particular, it doesn't necessarily sound like product management. So I drilled down. I said, well, what did you really do? And I asked him a bunch of leading questions like, how did you figure out what needed to be the problem that needed to be solved? Did you work with other people to solve that? Did you have to pitch your solution to anybody? So he said, yes, he had to do all those things, right? So he had to do market research to understand what the real underlying problems that needed to be solved were. So they got a design brief, but he then interviewed people to figure out, well, what are the actual things that are going on? There were some logistics problems. There were some things where the packages weren't it was hard to pack them, things like that. So he learned what the real design constraints were. He then led a team, which included himself, to create a solution using all the design tools that he had. And then he had to pitch this solution to the stakeholders, right? At the end of the challenge, he had to say, well, here's why this solution is a better solution than the other competitors in this challenge, right? And that's how he won, because he had a better solution. So that's pitching. So I said, that sounds like, even though you weren't a product manager, you did product management in this job. So I don't have the rewrite that I gave him for his resume, but this is along the lines of what I would suggest doing. It's not very well wordsmithed, but basically my suggestion would if he's going for a product management job, he should do something along these lines. He should call himself, first of all, he should say, I was a product manager developer. Give the team a name. I suggested calling it Team Raptor in this project, right? And so then he talks about the things he did, which are aligned with those product management steps of finding problems, creating solutions, taking the solutions to market. So he discovered key design constraints for new package design by interviewing the client's logistics, packaging, and packing teams, right? So that's market discovery. Very important thing that we do as product managers. We don't do enough of it. We should do more. And then he said, he resolved significant logistics problems using design. So solved some results by a solution that he did using CAD, CAM, and physical models, and then he pitched. Then he demonstrated his design and showed that it was a better solution than what they had existing. So this was for the case of this guy who was, as I say, he was a design student, and he had this design project, and that's what he did to make the design project work. So what if you are already a product manager and you're trying to get your next job? Well, actually, all of the things I just said still apply, except you probably were actually, your actual title probably was product manager. But you probably did similar things, and you should have done similar things. You should be out finding market problems. You should be driving the creation of solutions to those problems. Now that may be features, because a feature typically is a solution to a problem, or it may be a whole module, or it may be a whole product. The solutions come in all different levels. And then you're going to help the sales team take those solutions to market, or you're going to tell them how to pitch it, or you're going to talk to customers about how great it is, or you're going to do all those kinds of things, right? Or you're going to pitch to your executive team about how they should fund a new feature or a new product, right? Those are all activities that we do as product managers. So you should have some similar stories that have that kind of structure. Find a problem, create a solution, pitch it, take it to market. And so those are the kinds of things that you're going to be able to talk about, just like this guy could talk about this in the very small context of a academic project that he did for school, but you're going to have that for actual products. So the bottom line is, if it's not your first PM job, you're essentially going to be doing the same thing. I've got the spiral here because you just keep doing the same thing. Now you might get higher and higher in the organization, but you're going to be doing a lot of the same things: finding problems, creating solutions, pitching those solutions, pitching the executive team on funding the solutions, all of those things. And it's going to be the same thing. And what it's going to be really is it's going to be stories about the things that you did as part of your job to create value in the world. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that story structure in just a minute. So again, I'm Nils Davis. I'm the author of this book, The Yellow Book. It's you can get it on Amazon in paperback or Kindle. I've got a podcast, All the Responsibility, None of the Authority. I've got links to all these things down in the notes for this video, so you don't have to write any of this down. And I just wanted to mention all this before we move on and talk about stories. So if you think about your resume, the way that I think about a resume is every bullet point on your resume should have some kind of a story behind it. You want somebody to look at your resume, and there's some things, I'll do another video about how people scan resumes and how to make them more scannable by human beings. So there's two challenges with resumes. One challenge is that there's these automatic robots that read your resume and just look for keywords. I'm not going to talk too much about that in the other video, but I'm going to talk about how human beings look at your resume, because you've got a few seconds, maybe 10 seconds, for a human being to look at your resume and say, oh, I'm going to read this in a little bit more detail. So once you've gotten past that point where they're going to look at it in a little more detail, they're going to start looking at your bullets. And you want your bullets to say something that's interesting. You want the person reading your resume to say, oh, that sounds like there might be an interesting story behind that bullet. I'd like to understand what that story is. So every bullet on the resume, basically you should think of it as having a story behind it. And what is a story? Well, I've talked a lot in other videos, and again, links down below, about how to tell a story, but the basic simple structure is that the story it starts with a problem. You talk about the solution that you did or that you helped somebody do, and then the results, the outcome of the problem. So the way that I think about how you should develop these things, I'm sorry for looking at my phone, that was bad. The way I talk about developing these things is think about what your best story is. Say, if I were to come up to you and say, tell me about your best story about being a product manager, start with that one. And you start by saying, well, what was the big problem that I solved? What was the big problem that I solved in this story? What makes the story so interesting? Because what makes stories interesting is big problems, big conflict. So what was the big problem or conflict? And then you think about, well, what did I do to solve that? Typically, as product managers and technologists, we like to go on and on about the solution. You want to keep that brief, really, in this context. And then you think about, well, what was the outcome? What were the results? Who got a raise? Did anybody get a raise? Did we not go out of business? Did I get a commendation? And of course, there's probably business results as well, right? We doubled revenue, or we grew revenue by 20%, whatever it might be. So that's the way that's a good, simple story structure. It's not the only story structure, but it's a very simple one. There was a problem. I did this thing about the problem. And as a result of my doing these things, there were some good results. So think about what your best story is. Write it down in this structure, start to practice it. And again, I have a lot of other material about how to tell stories. So I'm not going to do a storytelling training. That was like a minute of storytelling training. The goal here is to have maybe a 1.5 to 2 minute story that's sort of your best story. And that is, you're going to be using these stories. You're going to develop a number of these. You're going to be using these in your job interviews. How are you going to use them? Well, you use these stories to answer these behavioral types of questions. Tell me about a time you did something. You showed initiative. You were innovative. You were creative. You had to deal with a difficult person. You had to manage a big team. You had to change course. You had to tell somebody no. All of those types of things, those questions are like typical questions that you get in a product management interview. Actually, lots of different kinds of interviews have these kinds of questions. And your stories are going to help you answer these questions. You're going to be prepared for these questions because you've worked out these stories. The good news is that a lot of your stories will address multiples of these questions. But on the other hand, you really need to have a handful of these stories at least in order to be prepared for any type of question that might come up. So you're going to be working on these stories. And again, I have a whole bunch of stuff about writing these stories and telling these stories and things like that. So the final thing is, as you develop these stories, you're going to start from your current resume, which probably doesn't have the bullets all where they're related to a story. But as you develop your stories, you're going to start switching out your bullets for just being things like, I did my job, which is what most bullets on most resumes are, to, I created these results by doing this thing. In other words, you start from your story, which was problem, solution, results. So there was a problem, I solved it, and I got these results. And then the resume, you're going to reword that. And the bullet point is going to be, I got these results by doing this solution. You don't talk about the problem, but you want to make that interesting enough, the results compelling enough, that an interviewer is going to ask you about it. The ideal situation in an interview is somebody looks at your resume and says, oh, this looks really interesting. Tell me more about that. And then you tell your little 2-minute story about what was behind that bullet. And with the goal being, you want them at the end of that story to say, oh, that's really interesting. Can you tell me more? So you don't want to go on and on. You want them to try to draw that out of you. And so that's really an ideal outcome for the stories and the bullet points on your resume. And so that and that's the ideal situation for the interview, right? You want the interviewer to say, this is interesting. I want to learn more about this. And then when they start to learn more, to have them be even more engaged. And a lot of that has to do with how dire the problem is and how compelling the results are. In particular, if everything has some real emotional resonance, both the problem and the results. Typically, the solution is not super emotionally resonant, but the problem is because it's bad, and the results are because they're so awesome. So that is some very quick pointers on how to tell your story as a product manager and how to articulate that onto your resume. And then when you get into an interview situation, how to make use of those stories. This is really just scratching the surface of all the things that one could talk about in terms of being prepared for getting a new job. But if you simply did the things that I talked about in this, so far I think we're 20 minutes into this video. If you simply did the things that I talked about in this video, your resume and your interviewing skills would be so much better than most of the people that you're competing with that it's a big competitive advantage. Most resumes are not that good. Most of them don't use this structure. Most people don't have these stories prepared. And if you have a few stories prepared and you have your resume with these types of bullets in it, it's going to actually really differentiate you. And it will help you get a job, get a better job, get a job faster. So I recommend doing all these things. Now, of course, there's a lot more to be said than I can say in 20 minutes about working on your resume, getting your job, all those sorts of things. So the action that I would like you to take is to put a comment on this video and say, hey, Nils, I'd really like you to talk about this other thing about finding a job. Or, of course, it might just be something else about product management. Finding jobs seems to be always on everybody's mind. That's often a compelling thing. But maybe there's some things about being a better product manager. I'm happy to answer those questions as well. As I said, you can take a look at the other links that I have in the show notes for all kinds of different things related to stories and for all the other things related to product management. My podcast, you can subscribe to that. And until the next video, next Monday, I do these every Monday night, 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. Good luck with your resume. Good luck with your job searching if that's what you're doing. Best of luck with your product management. And if you need any advice, have any questions, totally, I'm here for you. You can just drop me a note on the thing. There's so many different ways to contact me. You can figure them all out. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter, blah, blah, blah. Until then, certainly I would recommend taking a look at some of the other videos I might have on the channel. And some of them are probably going to be listed right over there. If I figure out how to do that. I can't figure out how to point there. Anyway, take a look at some videos, subscribe to the channel. And until next time, this is Nils Davis. Bye-bye.